Hello and welcome to the Cyber Weekly. The Cyber Weekly is a podcast which talks about cybersecurity. So we are on the road to 1,000 subscribers. So be sure to subscribe to the show and share it with friends and family. So today we are joined by Andrew. So Andrew, welcome to the show, and could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
So, Deo, thank you for inviting me for the podcast. Maybe I'll be subscriber 1001 at the end. My name is Andrew Olusivi. I have been working in the technology space for about 19 years now. For the last 15 years, it has been a bit more focused. I've been looking at cybersecurity, information security in general in the banking sector. So my conversation with you is really going to be skewed to banking. But these concepts can be used, they're not industry specific. They can be used across for any organization that uses technology. So that is the background. I've exposed myself to a lot of training. I've exposed myself to a lot of security corridors, if I can use that, where we meet different professionals in different industries, share ideas. The end game really is to help me understand how better to help the organizations I work with to protect their critical assets. And so that is how we got here. In terms of background, like I said, there's a lot of security training that has been done, including certifications, workshops, discussions, formal and informal, but really just to build a strong muscle that we can then, confidently have this conversation. But most importantly, to bring on people that are coming in this line of security, like a career guidance of sorts, but also to do my day-to-day, which is just protecting the bank's information assets, so the organization's information assets. So that is the background, Dale.
Yeah. So now, if we're talking about protection, we need to also talk about things to do with Patch Tuesday, because that is something which is common every month and we usually look at them. So, in your context, as a person who is a CISO, if they come to you, the situation where now, like for this month, we have Patch Tuesday and there were 78 vulnerabilities, 11 were critical, and 66 were important, and 5 were being exploited. So, what's your thought process and approach in terms of such a scenario?
So Patch Tuesdays are a very big thing in my world, or at least in any organization's existence. Those that are very heavy on technology. Patch Tuesday is when we usually receive patches to the vulnerabilities that may exist in our environment. So, like you said, a total of 70, was that 78?
Yes,
5 were exploited.
actively being
So what
exploited.
they're actively being exploited, is that within our organization or outside in on the internet or out there in the cyber world? Do we know where these are exploited?
These are being exploited within the Windows platform as a whole, because these were specifically Windows updates.
Okay. So I think for us, or for any CISO out there, or for any security professional out there, you have to first focus on these 5. These 5 are already weaponized, meaning we know they're being actively used to either breach an organization's systems, or they're being used to get unauthorized access, maybe escalate privileges, maybe even cause a shutdown or denial of service. So we have to laser focus on these 5 fast, and not in a matter of days, not in a matter of weeks, immediately. So usually when we have a list of those vulnerabilities that have been picked up, you have to look at those critical vulnerabilities. And the criticality of those is determined by the type of systems that are under attack or those systems that are vulnerable. Some of the systems within the organizations are critical. As you can imagine, not everything is equal in terms of systems. So some systems are critical to the business. Some might not necessarily be critical to the business. So if these 5 vulnerabilities have been identified, the task of you as a security professional, the CISO, the IT expert within your organization is to identify our critical services affected. If yes, then you have to spring immediately and start the patching activity. If you do have the patches, well and good, you can go ahead, implement them. If you don't, sometimes you have temporary fixes. You may not have a permanent fix, but you may have temporary fixes. So you can put these in place as you wait for a permanent fix, either to be produced by Microsoft or the team to put together, different layers of controls to protect the system. But all in all, start with those 5, fix them, and make sure you can confirm that these 5 have been fully patched. Then you go to the 11. You talked about 11. 11 of them are important. Did you say 11 are critical or important?
11 were critical and 66 were important.
Okay, so even those 11 that are critical, they might not be actively being exploited, but you cannot, put them under the table. You cannot give them third, fourth priority. You have to look at them as well. They might not be exploited in the moment, but they do have potential to cause serious damage. Something like remote code execution or privilege escalation. If these are some of the vulnerabilities that you're seeing when you do your vulnerability scans, you have to put this second tier priority. So within 72 hours, 2 to 3 days max, these 11 critical ones, you have to make sure that these are addressed. So if the systems that are affected here are internet facing, you cannot relax. These 11 might not be actively exploited. They might not be weaponized at the moment, but you can rest assured they will be exploited. So you don't want to give it a very big window, because now what you're doing and unknown to you is you're giving the hackers or the unauthorized persons to now manage to get into your system. So if you look at the systems that are being impacted and some of them are internet facing, you want to make sure that these are addressed. Then finally, the 66, you say they're important.
Yeah.
The 66, I think you can now go back to your normal patching cycle. Different organizations have different approaches to this patching cycle, but what is recommended, of course, is quick turnaround time. If your patching cycle, if you, for example, patch Tuesday, so the assumption is every week we expect to receive some patches for vulnerabilities that we have identified in our environment. The expectation is within that week, or maximum within the next 2 to 3 weeks, you have to address these 66. So you take them through the normal patching cycle. You still have to assess them, though. The 66 might be important, but can later on, become critical. Again, depending on what the threat landscape looks like. So I always advise my team to look at these with the risk lens. What's the impact if an important vulnerability is exploited, or an important or one of these 66 important ones are exploited? What would be the impact to the systems? Which systems are being identified for these 66? Are they critical to the business? So you have to have these conversations or these processes within the team to ultimately tell you how to deal with those that may not come out from the scan report as critical, but important. So normal patching cycle can then go on. And the ultimate goal is to make sure you fix or you implement these patches. So that is how I would look at Patch Tuesday. If it's a big Patch Tuesday, You said 78 total. That's a big number. That is how I would separate them. The approach really is to triage immediately. You want to do a quick assessment. What is critical? What systems are affected? Are they critical to the business? And then you can go into the patching activity, prioritizing what's critical to the business, and then you can then patch up any that might be outstanding from that.
Yeah, that's a very holistic way of looking at it, because people usually just think, I just throw the patches there, but the way you've explained it really brings it down to earth, and also brings the aspect of business first centric kind of setup, where anything critical to the business is the first to be looked at.
Yeah.
So now after that, now we're looking at post this patching. How often do we need to now think of maybe penetration testing for our company after such a situation?
So I might have left out something. Patching in itself, and I think you've touched it as well in your remark there. It's not the finish line. There's this notion that when we patch 100%, produce reports of patching, that everything is okay. So it's a cycle. Just like you see Patch Tuesday, your patching should be, continuous. So don't patch once. And this is just a word out to any uh, technology persons that are responsible for patching, the patch management team in different organizations. It's a continuous effort. So you don't patch once and forget. So you want to verify if these patches worked, and I'm just going into what you talked about in your question. Patches in themselves, or patching as it is, while we think it might be fixing a vulnerability we have in our system, sometimes they do open up the systems or create loopholes or gaps or other vulnerabilities in the system that we may not necessarily identify in the moment. So usually you want to push the teams to run a test, or what you're referring to as a pen test, after the patch within a period of maybe a week, under 2 weeks, just to confirm a couple of things. Did the patch work that you implemented? Was there any residual, gaps that may have been left as a result of the patching? Once you do those tests religiously after you do major patches, there you can be sure that at least your exposure has been greatly reduced, and you can monitor this over time. So don't just patch, do a post, patch validation kind of test, and make sure that the patches that you have put in place are actually doing the intended objective of making the controls, security controls, effective. So they just thought we should add that to the initial submission on Patch Tuesday.
And now when you dig deeper into exactly penetration testing, should it be quarterly? Should it be weekly? How is it supposed to be set up?
So there are different ways. Again, like I introduced, different organizations have different approaches, but best practice, usually you want to increase the frequency of the pen tests. For example, you've had a major system upgrade, maybe the operating system, maybe you've introduced a new software within the environment, maybe you've introduced new hardware in the environment. You want to do a penetration test rather immediately. There's a notion again that organizations usually run penetration tests once a year. Many, many years ago, that was okay. Today, things are moving a bit faster. The threat landscape is always evolving. So if you introduce new systems, new processes, new hardware, you want to run you want to run penetration tests immediately. So for me, I would recommend, again, this is different. This is very subjective. Different organizations approach it differently. But a minimum of 3 months every quarter. The assumption in that period you have done a lot of patching, you might have introduced a new system. You know, you want to continually give the business comfort or guarantee them that these new technological introductions in our environment have not exposed us, or even the patches that we have been running on our systems have not opened up more loopholes for attackers to exploit. So I think it is safer to bring that penetration testing within a period of 3 months, so that by the end of the year, at least you can gradually tell how you've been progressing in terms of exposure score for your organization. So 3 months, I think, is acceptable. But again, this is subject to different organizations have different approaches to the frequency, because sometimes it requires you to bring in experts or penetration testers that might cost money. So some organizations might not readily have this budget, set aside for these frequent tests. But for those that have the capacity, the tools, the teams, you can do these penetration tests a little more frequent. So the other angle you can look at it is penetration testing usually breaks the system. Not usually, but there's very high chances it could break the system. Now, again, depending on the criticality of the service or the system that you're trying to penetrate and test, business may have to make a decision. They want a system uptime of 99 plus. If you're going to continually pen test this system, there are very many chances you might break it, and that downtime can translate into either loss of revenue, reputational issues you might want to avoid. So again, like I said, this is very subjective. You want to each situation is different. So it takes the CISO an understanding of the environment to then determine what the frequency would be, looking at cost, looking at impact to the business in the event that the system is broken, plus any other issues that may exist that may result in you into delaying your penetration testing or increasing the frequency. So, but good practice, 3 months, I think, is basically safe.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Now, at the end of the day, what are your expectations when it comes to your team? Because now we work with a lot of SOC teams in terms of ensuring that the security is maintained and all that. So what are the basic routines you would require for a SOC working for you?
Okay, so I look at the SOC as a central nerve system of an organization, and therefore my expectations have to reflect that, or the reflections or the expectations of any CISO should be in that line, understanding that the SOC does the monitoring for the organization. You have to treat, or your expectations for that team have to be that important or that serious. So you don't expect them to be fighting fires all the time. You want them to be ahead of the curve, especially with all the changes in technology.
So
Yeah.
when it comes to an IT audit, there are always the pressures, making sure that you're ensuring that your company is compliant with the necessary ISO or PCI DSS requirements. So how do you prepare your team for such a scenario?
So audits are usually very intense, especially for security people. Generally for businesses, but for security people, audits are very intense. It causes a lot of tension. So my approach usually try to change the mindset of the team, my team, the technology and security team. You want to shift their mindset from an audit panic every time an email comes from the audit team that they will be auditing. There's usually panic. You want to change the mindset of the team from being anxious or scared of audits to just be audit ready. And there are very many ways you can be audit ready. And it's not something you can do overnight. But when the year starts, when you're drawing up your team's plan and strategy, you start to build that mindset, or you try to prepare that mindset different ways. Things to do with documentation of procedures, processes. You want the team to document this ahead of time. You want to keep a detailed documentation on all the controls that you have in place. If you make any decisions, or for example, a change within your environment, you want to have this documented. The purpose of this, you know very well, when audit starts, they're very interested to see what the evidence looks like. If you cannot readily provide this evidence, these controls are going to be flagged as ineffective, and therefore that's an audit finding that you could avoid. I usually tell the team, if something is not documented, then it does not exist. If a control is not documented, it does not exist. So by doing this, you're trying to prepare them for when the audits come, that these documents are actually in place, they're up to date, they're approved, they have management's sign off, and that they are current. The last thing you want is to document an old control and then time for validation or time for reviewing the control and issues picked up. So you want to keep these rather current. You want to keep them up to date. But my call here usually to the team is document everything you do. If you introduce a new process, if you introduce a new control, document it. Let this information be readily available to the auditors. Then the other thing you can do, or the other thing I put in practice, is to do internal mocks, or you can refer to them as self-assessment. The team itself can assess the controls that they have in place to protect their systems and score themselves. If there are any gaps that are picked up during the self-assessment, you have an opportunity now to address these gaps, put in place treatment plans, timelines, budget if there's need for that, and address them. What this tells the auditor is that you have been proactive. You have gone ahead to identify the loopholes in your environment. You have gone the extra step to put a treatment plan in place, and that you're following it. You even have timelines. If you can evidence this during the audit, it will make the audit exercise very, very smooth and less stressful. So you want to do that. You want to do periodic self-assessment, and that these reports have management's visibility, and that management, is taking proactive actions to address the gaps picked up. Then finally, you want to empower the team, and you can empower the team. Different people have different ways they empower their teams, but in the different domains. So for example, there's their databases, there's networks, there are applications, there's general technology controls. Whoever is manning these different domains, you want to give them, maybe by way of training, confidence, knowledge, understanding of how these systems actually work. People take it to another level. They could do cross-department attachments just to expand the knowledge of the technical teams when it comes to support of technology. So similarly, you want to bring in these different tactics, but the end game, really, the end objective is to make sure that the team understands their domain, they understand the interlinks, interconnections, the dependencies, across the different domains within security or within technology, so that when the audit comes and starts asking questions, they can confidently provide evidence, they can confidently explain the controls environment, and they can have, an educated conversation with the auditor, and that can help you reduce unnecessary findings, or just to help the organization improve its control effectiveness generally. During the audit, if these things are not clearly brought out, if you cannot demonstrate understanding of the system that you're supporting, these usually result in two findings. Sometimes the control exists, but because you cannot explain it very well to the auditor, now you have an issue you might not necessarily have a fix for, and yet the control actually exists. So it helps you to understand the system, it helps you understand your domain. If you can even expand your knowledge, beyond networks or beyond databases, during the audit, life is made much, much easier. You frame the audits as an opportunity to improve your controls environment. You don't just want to get an audit that has a pass. You want to use an audit as an opportunity for you to improve, maybe introduce new controls, change the process, make uh, integration, to put systems together that could perform the same task, just to reduce the turnaround time or output time. So the audit, we usually look at it as an opportunity. We don't go in to argue with auditors. We go in to understand from what angle are they looking at this, what control can we put in place, what processes can we introduce that can improve the overall efficiency of the business. So audits, once you shift the mindset of the team to look at it as an opportunity to continually improve the controls environment, I think the team will have less stress, but you'll also be adding value to the business in on the whole.
Yeah. So if you look at now, if you're tuning into now the board, because they're definitely the reason why we actually have the jobs. So when you're trying to elaborate most of these things, how do you bring it up to make it more to manage their expectations, and also know when it's unrealistic, and how do you control that whole conversation around that?
So as a security person, or as a cybersecurity person in general, the board the board level is a very interesting space, especially for new technology professionals starting to report into boards, or having, discussions with boards in terms of what is being done from a technology and security perspective for the organization. It's very interesting. What we have noticed that has happened in the past few years is a lot of awareness has been made available to board members, both the technical and the non-technical board members. And as a result of this, unrealistic expectations have started to pop up. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing in the moment, but questions like, are we 100% secure? So a board member could ask a security person or a technology person a question like this: are we 100% secure from breaches? To them, it's a question that might need a yes or no answer, or a percentage, or a fraction. To the technology person, that's a very, very tough question. So part of the evolution we have seen, a lot of awareness has been brought to the board, which is a good thing, because now they can make informed decisions when it comes to security related risks. But in the reverse, or on the other side of it, a lot of unrealistic expectations have resulted. And the conversations you will hear randomly are questions like that. So the approach, okay. I think I'm going off your question a bit. You wanted to find out how
you
we
manage.
manage the unrealistic.
Yeah.
So one thing we need to remember when it comes to board discussions at that level, most of it, especially for security people, is trust. If you can give the board the comfort, the trust, the confidence that you have done everything in your power and you can demonstrate these things to protect the organization's information assets, you will start to get their ear. They will start to understand what it is you're doing, what kind of support you need, but also to measure your performance over time, or measure the organization's performance over time as a result of implementing security controls. So that is one thing. You want to build rapport with them. And to do that, you need to speak a language they understand. When I was introducing, I was talking about the challenge technology people have translating technical issues or technology risks into business terms. At this level, that issue is a bit amplified because, for example, we started with vulnerabilities. How can you explain to the board member what it means if a vulnerability on a system has not been patched within a given time frame? What they do understand very easily is the impact in terms of financial, reputation, regulatory. They will understand this conversation rather easier. So, as a techie person, yours is to have the conversation with the board from a risk management perspective. What is the risk? What is the impact? If you can explain those two very, very clearly to the board, you'll get their full attention, you'll get their support. And it will also remove the ambiguities, the unclear, the confusion, the mystery. It will make things very clear. I talked about communication earlier for the SOC team. For the CISO, sorry, at this stage, having conversations or having regular presentations or discussions with the board, one of your primary tasks is to demystify technology issues to the board. Explain these issues to them in a manner that they will understand how compliance or non-compliance or what the financial impact will be. For example, if it's a financial services organization and they have a core banking platform, for example, if for whatever reason the banking platform is unavailable for an hour, for 2 hours, for 3 hours, maybe system downtime, maybe a patch, maybe a penetration test actually broke the system, it is very easy, or it should be rather easy, for a CISO or for anyone representing technology during that incident or crisis situation to explain to them that when the system is off for 1 hour, this is how much money we lose as a business. This is how much income we will forego. Or because of a system downtime, customers are going to go on social media and put all this mess or put all these reputational related issues on social media because of unavailability of our systems. Or, for example, if there's a regulatory implication for our system not being up, when you explain things like this to the board, they will understand. They will understand the impact, reputation, regulatory, even financial. And they'll be able to make an informed decision on how to proceed, either introduce, budget for a new system upgrade, introduce new processes, integrate processes, they'll be able to make decisions very easily because now they understand what started as a technology risk or technology issue has now been translated to speak business. And I think this is how you get the most from majority of our board members. So those are a couple of things you have to master. You have to get the trust. They have to understand that you know the things you're talking about and that you can verify, you can validate the things you're saying. And then two, you have to speak their language. You have to understand to communicate technology risks as business risks or in business terms so that they can then make an informed decision. So when it comes to managing expectations of the board, they want to hear very clear communication, especially from security and technology in general. They want to understand what is it going to cost us to fix this issue? What would be the impact if the issue materializes, if the risk materializes? What would be the financial impact? Do we lose money? Do we get regulatory fines? Do we get sued by clients? Do we get reputational issues on social media that or in the papers to affect our clientele? They need to understand these things so that when they sit and decide to go a different direction, they have this information readily available, even though it started as a technology risk or a technology vulnerability. So that is how you manage, or at least this is how we try to create the linkage between security and the executives and the board. Speak their language, communicate very clearly and very frequently. And I think that can take you a long way improving or removing the ambiguity when it comes to security and people at the board.
Yeah, thank you for that. It has definitely highlighted something which I've never thought about clearly, which is if you're now, an example would be if you're now talking about ransomware, you still bring it up that, okay, your drives will be encrypted and you won't be able to actually access the systems and then to be down and then you're not able to, customers when they come in, they cannot, access your services, which would lead to social media outbreak of you not being able to do your work. Then also some clients running away because of you not being able to have your services up and running. Yeah, so I feel like it has opened my eyes to that type of linking up information. So you bring it from a cybersecurity point to a layman's language or even which the board can also easily understand that the level of implication that incident can actually have. Yeah, that's really interesting. So as we are drawing closer towards the end, have we reached the point in the country where there's a responsible way of disclosing incidents? Because definitely we are so many. We're having multiple financial institutions. We're having fintechs. I think they're also part of financial institutions at this point. We're having all these different industries. So is there a way that we are working on something where we can also share information that, when there is this issue, we don't all have to face it the same way and then reinvent the wheel? Are there situations, are you seeing that happening?
So I'll speak from a wider perspective first. I've seen in different markets in West Africa, Kenya, Rwanda. I think Rwanda is also on a journey to that. Even Uganda. If we're to limit our conversation to the financial services sector, the proactiveness I've noticed in West Africa, even in Asian financial institutions, there's the level of comfort or the level of confidence that these organizations have to share threat intelligence, to share real-time incidents or breaches in a timely manner has improved, especially in the recent couple of years. In some regions, it's mandatory. For example, in West Africa, the expectation now, in Nigeria, for example, the expectation now is you have to send security logs to the national SIEM. I call it a national SIEM, but they have a national repository of logs that then processes these logs, identifies anomalies, flags potential risks. That conversation I've had an opportunity to have that discussion even here with the banking association. The target is to convince, and not just convince, but explain to different banks that it's important for us to have a central visibility of the threat landscape. If an issue materialized in one bank, the expectation is the next bank should not be hit, with a similar incident. There is a drive, part of it regulatory. I'm speaking general across different markets. Part of it is regulatory, but part of it is different banks within different countries realizing they cannot fight cyber threat individually. First of all, the technical know-how, the cost, the budget, the skill set required might not exist in an individual institution. So many organizations or many banks for this conversation have realized that it's not going to be possible for us to fight cybercrime as individual organizations. So what they have decided to do is to collaborate, work together, banking institutions or banking associations in different markets to try and create a uniform front against cyber fraud or cybercrime or cyber security related issues. And that has resulted in two, national SIEMs or national SOCs or national SATs or security monitoring platforms where all organizations plug in, send security logs, and then the experts at that central point can then readily review, identify anomalies, and then guide organizations on how to protect themselves. If they can stop the attackers in their tracks, then they take that direction. But that is because of that uniform effort, the uniform front to fight against cyber related issues. So there is a going concern, of course, when it comes to the level of confidentiality or the level of secrecy as organizations share. Some organizations are not confident or comfortable yet to share their information. Some organizations are ready, partly because they have been hit before and they understand the impact of a cyber breach. Some because they have not been hit, they still don't believe they are exposed or they don't believe they will be hit. And so they may be hesitant to share information. But the other angle here is the media. And we have been trying to push this conversation to the media houses to have training on how to report cyber issues. A trained cyber reporter will explain to you what happened, the impact, who is affected, in a manner that might not spook the customer, threaten or scare the customer. So in the communication of these incidents beyond the customers, to the public, to the media houses, there is a certain level of miscommunication or misunderstanding or misconstrued of misunderstanding of issues in general. And therefore, because of that, they cannot be effectively communicated, creating panic, creating massive flow of customers from one business to the next, because they can't. Cybersecurity is still relatively vague in many people's minds. And so if you don't communicate the breach, if you don't communicate the risk very clearly, you're going to threaten a lot of customers. So there's a willingness by some organizations to share, threat intelligence. there is a certain section of the organizations that are not yet confident, that are not yet sure that if they do share this information, it might not affect them as a business. So it's a bit of a mixed bag, but for the most part, regulation is helping, force organizations to understand what the benefits of this sharing of security threats will do for the sector, but also nationally for the country. And that has been the main driver, with the exception of banks, because they're not regularly, but they're heavily regulated or heavily assessed. They're under a very keen eye. They tend to move a bit faster. So those that are in that category have, volunteered to provide this information, share with even their competition in the market. But we do share a lot of vendors, technology vendors. So if one vendor is breached and is serving multiple banks or financial institutions within the market, there's a very high chance many will be affected. So imagine if there was a central way of identifying this threat and in real time communicating it to the different clients of that vendor. It would save the industry a lot of headache. It will also save the industry a lot of money. So that is where I see it. The challenges, what has forced organizations to now confidently share, and what is happening with those organizations, the slow movers that may not necessarily be ready to share information. They now see the benefits of the central sharing, and this is generally not just here, but generally in the different markets. This is what you will observe. There is a driving force for sharing. There's still limitations on how much is shared, with whom, the nature in which this is reported in the press. So there are so many moving parts, but what gives me comfort, or what gives me some level of confidence, is that we see majority, especially when the banks and the telecoms move in that direction. The rest of the organization, health, security, they'll plug in. And I think that's where in the next couple of years, I think that is where we're going to be, where we can, as a country or as a region or as a market, centrally or collaboratively front against cyber security issues.
Yeah, thank you for that. Now, looking back, what are the skills you wish you would have learned? And if someone is beginning their career, what advice would you give them on those different skills they would learn to learn?
You mean security skills or general technology skills?
Let's focus on cybersecurity and the life skills also.
I'm still figuring out life skills. So, but for security related skill sets, I think what I observed, and what I observe, especially the young technology professionals that are coming up, they tend, okay, it's not a mistake. I don't know if it's by design, but they tend to over specialize. Well, over specializing is a good thing. It kind of limits your expansion or your growth. So if, for example, you leave university, high school as a programmer, and then you continue on that path, you rob yourself the opportunity to learn the other aspects of technology and security in this case. So, and I think, again, this is very subjective, but I want you to hear the angle I'm bringing this. When you limit yourself to a certain domain, at a certain point, your growth ceiling will hit, where you cannot go outside, or you find challenges going out. So what I usually encourage the young security professionals as they're coming up, try and expose yourself to different domains. Understand that when you develop an application, what are the security implications of the coding that you have done in the background, or what are the loopholes that may exist from the type of coding you have done or the quality of coding you have done? Are you developing applications with security in mind, or you just want them to work? You want them to be operational. So you widen your scope of understanding of just that application you've developed to make sure that one, it works very well. Two, that it's secure, that can be securely and trusted, can be securely used and trusted all the time. Because what that will do is, create confidence in the customers, your clients, whoever is using your application will be confident that their data, that their transactions are, are protected at all times. So don't just be a hardcore coder. Try and understand the security aspect of that coding and how that plugs into the wider ecosystem of the business that uses your applications to serve customers. Understand the business as well, because okay, your application is working, but how does that translate to you making money, or how does that help the organization make money or save costs? Because this application you're making, you have to sell it to an organization or to an individual. You have to explain to them, or you have to justify to them why they should buy your application and not the next application. So you have to understand business terms to explain the technological capabilities of a solution, but also the financial benefits of using it. So don't just be a coder, understand business, and once you clearly connect those two, then you'll be in a better place. From a security perspective, we have been fortunate, we have to understand databases, we have to understand networks, we have to understand applications. This gives you a wider knowledge on how different systems work, how they integrate, and how to secure those different touch points for the different systems. So my message usually to upcoming or people looking into this field as a potential life, career path, is to continually my message is continually expose yourself to different aspects of technology. Now there's blockchain, there's AI, there's Bitcoin, there's all sorts of technological advancements. Understand what these advancements are. Understand the security aspect of these advancements, because what happens then is when organizations implement these solutions, you will be the main contact person to help them address any issues security related to this new advancement. So that is always the message. And also stay curious, always try and learn something new, because there's always new things coming up in technology. So my call usually is keep your head, up out of the water, try and hear the new advancements, expose yourselves to them, educate yourself about these things. If you need to certify, go ahead. This is how you can demonstrate your competence. And then practice. If you are doing a hands-on kind of task, if you're coding, if you're configuring things, if you are setting up devices, try and get your hands dirty as much as possible, because what this will do for you is it will give you that experience you might not necessarily get in a classroom. So Deo, I think I'll end it there. But that is what I would tell the people coming up in the profession or who are choosing security as a career path.
Finally, what are your parting shots? And where can people find you? If are there any events you're preparing? What's going on in your life, and how can people find it?
So closing remark, I usually say security is not just a technical challenge, especially nowadays. It's about transforming culture, people's understanding of the impact of security incidents, clear communication, over time, and consistency. So there's no silver bullet to fixing security issues. You have to win by showing up every day and doing the basic things very well. So this is the only way you can make progress. So this is the only way you can track, improvement in performance. This is the only way you can track improvement in the secure or exposure score of an organization, by showing up every day, doing the basic things the right way, and documenting and making sure that you create awareness for the different organizations or the different levels of management. Continually create awareness, expose yourselves to as much knowledge when it comes to security, because you never know when you need this knowledge to help your organization from a crisis. So as parting shots, I think that's always the message. Stay inquisitive, keep learning, create awareness.
Thank you for that. Is there anywhere else people can find you?
Oh, so I am always available on my LinkedIn. I'm not very active on the other platforms, but on LinkedIn, if you really need to reach out to me, that would be a very good platform to have a conversation.
Okay. Thank you for that. I've definitely learned a lot about communicating with the board and also understanding security in a holistic way, and starting from the basics of understanding what your business finds critical to all that goes into what we consider as cybersecurity as a whole. So thank you, Andrew, for sparing your time to come and tell us more about this.
Okay. Thank you, Dale.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
Yes. So for those who are still here, please share and like. We're on the road to 1,000 subscribers. So be sure to share the show and like it. All in all, see you all in the next episode.